on to the state of the nation. And there's a new idea floated by the University of Boston proposing that the International Monetary Fund sell a portion of their gold reserves in order to raise the required funding to assist nations that are prone towards climate crisis in the future. Now, the International Monetary Fund holds around 90.5 million ounces of gold on its balance sheet, a legacy from its founding in 1944. When the member countries paid their quotas in gold. Now that gold still remains with the IMF. This idle gold is sitting on the IMF's balance sheet at a historical cost of around $45 per ounce compared to $2,600 per ounce on global markets. Meanwhile, the fund's Catastrophic Containment and Relief Trust, or the CCRT, which provides grants to eligible countries to help cover debt service repayment after a natural disaster, is in desperate need of replenishment and reforms. Currently, only 30 members qualify for CCRT access, while the cash balance hovers at approximately just around $103 million. Unfortunately, Sri Lanka is not part of that fund. But in consideration of the frequency of natural disasters, even right now, the whole of last week, Sri Lanka was getting battered by severe rain. That is very much impacting day-to-day lives of our people. We soon might be forced to seek help from this particular fund. Now, a new policy brief published by the Boston University Global Development Policy Center explores how CCRT access could be expanded and replenished using the proceeds of an IMF gold sale to meet the needs of climate-vulnerable developing countries, just like Sri Lanka. Let's now cross over to Boston, Massachusetts, and that's where we find Dr. Marina Zucker-Marques, who is the author of this paper. Dr. Zucker-Marques is the senior academic researcher at the Global Economic Governance Initiative at Boston University's Global Development Policy Center. Thank you very much, Doctor, for taking the time to join me. Now, how can you suggest that a private organization to sell their gold reserves?
This is a very good question, Mahesh. I think it's very important to clarify that the IMF, it's a public international organization. It has a mandate to provide a public good, which is financial stability, and help all its funding members, including Sri Lanka. So for context, it's public information, but very few people remember that the IMF has over 9 million ounces of gold in its balance sheet. It's a legacy from their creation in 1944, when its members paid the subscription using gold. So every IMF member, all the countries that can borrow from the IMF, they first need to pay a subscription. And earlier it was made in gold. We are suggesting the IMF to sell it gold because it's not the gold from a private institution, it's the gold from the membership for the countries that subscribed. So we're suggesting to make it a better use of these resources. Gold now are at a record price. And if the IMF were to sell its gold, they could profit over 200 billion. And this is, just for context, is twice their current lending. Now that countries are facing budgetary constraints, it's very important to think in better ways to use the resources of our society. And our study did exactly this. So the IMF has a fund that is called Catastrophe Containment and Relief Fund, the CCRT. And this fund is aimed to give debt relief for countries with low income when they face natural disasters like hurricanes, health disasters like the COVID. So during the time when they face these disasters, the country can avoid paying back the IMF. Currently, there are 30 eligible countries that, during the COVID, they didn't need to pay the IMF back for 2 years. The problem is that now the CCRT is depleted. They only have 103 million, and this is not sufficient to cover not only one country if they need to access. So Madagascar, they are going to pay the IMF 106 million. So if only Madagascar needed the resources, they wouldn't be able to tap the resources. So our study showed that if the IMF were to sell only just 4% of their gold reserves, they could help 86 countries giving that relief. So Our study is saying that we need to replenish the CCRT, and we think the gold is the best option.
All right, that makes sense in a way. Doctor, now, as of now, despite Sri Lanka is part of the IMF Emergency Fund Facility Program, we are not part of the Catastrophic Containment and Relief Funds, which is the CCRT. But with the current rate of natural disasters, even last week, that keeps happening here in this part of the world, Sri Lanka might need its assistance very soon. But in a situation like that, and as you explained that the funding is not there to expand two programs to more countries, how can the organization make way for such a request as the trend seems to be very alarming?
Exactly. So climate disaster is becoming more frequent, and the IMF should provide tools to help all countries, not only those with low-income countries that could access the CCRT. Countries like Sri Lanka that are not part of the CCRT could be helped in case of natural disasters if the IMF were to introduce what we call debt pauses. So basically, if there is a health issue or, hurricane draws, the country could stop paying back the IMF for at least a period of time. We know that the CCRT is target for lower income countries like Malawi, Congo, Ethiopia, but other countries that are middle income countries like Sri Lanka, Pakistan, Argentina, they also face natural disasters. If we were to use the gold to help these countries that are, large economies like Sri Lanka, Pakistan, Argentina, the IMF would need to sell up to 18% of the IMF gold, which could be seen as a very, a higher level. But the IMF could establish debt pauses. This is a tendency that is already on the way. Multilateral development banks like the World Bank, they have what is called climate resilience debt clauses that basically allow countries to postpone payments in time of need. We suggest in our study that the IMF should also incorporate similar clauses in their lending practice.
Doctor, in a situation where, let's say, many other countries do become part of this is just going to increase more debt portfolio to their national GDP, meaning more debt for these nations. Do you think this is a feasible step to keep proceeding on this path?
Exactly. Mahesh, you're referring to what we called the vicious cycle of debt. So countries that are more prone to climate disasters are the ones paying the highest price, although they contributed very little to cause the problem that is climate change. They not only need to borrow more to reconstruct, to mitigate risk, but they also pay higher interest rate because their situation is seen by the markets as riskier. This is certainly not a sustainable path, and it requires a coordinated approach from the international community. The IMF must be part of this conversation, and it can be a leader in this regards. We believe that the first step is replenishing the CCRT using the gold, which is the reserve of the community and the international community, and also introducing debt pauses for helping countries, larger economies, including Sri Lanka.
Absolutely. All right, we have to leave it at that. Thank you very much, Dr. Marina Zucker-Marquies, Senior Academic Researcher at the Global Economic Governance Initiative at Boston University. Appreciate it very much. A short break now. I'll be back with the closing.